Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a look at a brand new Pokemon in the world of Pokemon Go, Dhelmise. Dhelmise is available as a part of the new event, and it is in 3-star raids. Dhelmise is a grass and ghost type Pokemon, and for the moveset, we're looking at Shadow Claw, Power Whip, and Shadow Ball. It does also learn the move Astonish, but considering Dhelmise is pretty attack weighted, I'm opting for the pacing of Shadow Claw over the damage of Astonish. So without further ado, let's hop onto the matches and take a look at Dhelmise in action in the Open Ultra League. Hopping to the first match, leading Dhelmise into Clefable. I'm going to make it to the Shadow Ball when they make it to the Moonblast. They decide not to throw right away though, they're just going to go for an overfarm. Shadow Ball would hit very hard as Dhelmise is very attack weighted. Trevenant, the other grass ghost type, is actually slightly bulkier than Dhelmise, if that gives you any idea as to its bulk and attack stat. In comes Shadow Golurk, but the Mud Slap does not KO. Drapion makes the crunch, almost a one-hit KO, but Shadow Golurk 1 HP survive, and that's going to set up a little bit of extra farm for Dhelmise. Dhelmise now exiting with energy. Is the opponent going to bring back in the Clefable? The answer is yes. Now, Power Whip is a much better move than Trevenant's Seed Bomb. It's, I believe, 1.8 DPE compared to Seed Bomb being around 1.4, but that does come at a cost. Power Whip is slightly more expensive. It's 7 to the first, whereas for Seed Bomb, it's just going to be 6. Dhelmise, in an energy advantage and not taking a lot of fast move pressure, is in prime position to succeed. In the back is Drifblim, not for very long. Shadow Ball, one-hit KO, down goes Shadow Drifblim. In comes Clefable. Clefable is not going to make the Moonblast before Dhelmise gets the Power Whip. Power Whip KOs Clefable, and Dhelmise puts an exclamation point on an exciting game number 1. We're off to a terrible start in game number 2, though, leading into Pangoro, and Ghost plus Steel Cores get absolutely melted by the Dark Fighter Pangoro. I save switch into Drapion, fire off the Aqua Tail. Opponent will always no-shield the first, as now they can start unleashing close combats. I think Drapion could have value, so I will commit the shield, and there is Shadow Feraligatr. Feraligatr does not have to shield the Crunch, but it will do a ton of damage. Crunch is going to be no-shielded. I do get the defense drop, and my opponent is going to fire off the Hydro. This is close to Hydro Cannon range. Shadow Drapion is barely able to hang on, make it to one final Crunch. Crunch will be shielded. Aggressive switch to Dhelmise, looking for the farm down, but Feraligatr, unfortunately too bulky, able to withstand the Shadow Claws, make the Ice Beam, and force the shield. In comes Pangoro. Pangoro is, I believe, going to lose the CMP tie to Dhelmise. Pangoro has a very high attack stat, so that gives you an indication as to where Dhelmise is at in terms of its attack. Night Slash does huge damage. Opponent tries for a Karate Chop down. I have bad IVs on the Dhelmise, as of course you can only get them from raids, so I did a remote raid for mine, but I have just enough IVs to pick up the knockout, and now endgame Steelix versus Tentacruel. I'm in a great position. All I have to do is not let my opponent catch the game-winning Psychic Fangs onto Feraligatr, and I should be in a good spot. They go for the Scald, fishing for the debuff. They do not get the debuff, and they actually concede the match, not even playing to a potential catch condition. Bad lead in the next match, leading into a Shadow Dragonite. I'm going to save switch into Shadow Drapion. This is not an amazing spot to be for me. I'm going to fire off the Crunch. Crunch will do some solid damage to the Dragonite. Dragonite is going to shield, and I know that I lose 2s here, so I'm just going to let the Drapion go. Dhelmise will almost always need shields. In comes Shadow Feraligatr. I do make it to a Crunch. Shadow Feraligatr can tank this, but it will put them into the yellow. Much to my surprise, they actually end up shielding, so they're really trying to get shields down. I'm going to bring in Dhelmise. My opponent is highly likely to Hydro Cannon bait. This thing is quite glassy, so even a resisted Hydro Cannon would do a lot, so I am going to shield up. This, by my count, I believe could only be a Crunch. Maybe I missed one in there, but I decided to shield anyway, just in case I did miscount. And it looks like after throwing 3 in the move and it being a cap tie, that it was actually a miscount by me. Power Whip is going to pick up the KO. In comes the Shadow Dragonite. That's going to get hit with a Shadow Ball. So that's going to get KO'd. What do they have in the back? It's a Venusaur. That is not what I was expecting to see at all. Venusaur, I'm going to be firing off the Psychic Fangs as early as possible to try and ramp up the damage. I considered going for the Earthquake, but I think double Psychic Fangs is going to be the play. My opponent will be able to get to 2 Frenzies before I get to the double Psychic Fangs, but they decide not to throw it. They're going to try for the double up, but I don't think they can. They're going to get too low. 3 Thunder Fangs should KO, but they don't. Oh my, Venusaur 1 HP survive. The absolute heartbreak. We almost fought back from a near insurmountable lead, but instead we get absolute heartbreak as Venusaur hangs on to pick up the win. Bad lead in the next match, Dhelmise into Drifblim. I save switch into Shadow Drapion, and my opponent actually stays into Icy Wind, and this will be a CMP tie. I've played this opponent basically daily for the past few days. My current elo is sitting in the 3300s, so you end up playing a lot of the same players again and again, and they have a very, honestly, what I would consider to be a very atypical playstyle. They could just bring in Poliwrath and wall off my energy, but every time, even though at this point they're probably familiar with the fact that I'm not running Sludge, they stay into Icy Wind and let me grab a shield. And that puts me in a better position overall. Now, I can take advantage of the timers, switch out, because this battler in particular, their entire team is filled with debuff moves. They love going for debuffs, so I'm just gonna no-shield. At this point, I've played them long enough that I'm gonna no-shield the first, I shield the second, I get the call right as it's gonna be a Scald, and they switch back into Drifblim. At this point, I'd forgotten what their third was, but all I remembered was that it does have access to a debuff move. They're gonna go for an Icy Wind. I'm more than happy to let this through, but to my horror, it's Mystical Fire. I'm gonna bring in Dhelmise. They're back on the 5 cycle, so I will get a massive farm down in the back. Oh, that's what it was. It is Tentacruel, and Tentacruel is now going to be met with a Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball connects, dealing devastating damage. I make it to another Shadow Ball, but unfortunately for me, my switch clock is not up. If my clock was up, I would love to switch out, but unfortunately, I'm not able to do so. In comes the Steelix, and I get denied. That's terrible. If they Acid Spray and try and snipe, I have to switch instantly, and I do. I reset the debuff, get the farm down, and they can't make a Scald. I can go for the Bad Manners Earthquake because this is only an Acid Spray. Acid Spray does no damage and is insanely resisted by Steelix, so we get to have a little bit of fun. The trader who will throw nothing but debuff moves, we get to pick up the KO with an Earthquake. Dream lead in the next match, Dhelmise into Gastrodon, opponent save switches into Corviknight, and I'm going to farm up a ton of energy before I send in Steelix. I'm expecting, hopefully, that Dhelmise energy will go far for me in this game, so I'm more than happy to desync the switch timers just a little bit if it means that I can absolutely over-farm on energy. This matchup, since they're actually running Payback, is not as comfortable. If they were running Ironhead Sky Attack, I would completely wall them off and I'd be in a great position, but unfortunately, they are not running that moveset. They do have Payback. I'm going to go for a Psychic Fangs and a farm down here. Corviknight is going to switch into Gastrodon, and now I switch back into Dhelmise and fire off the Power Whip. But the moment I do, I realize I should have farmed up more because this is clearly a bait out because something they have in the back is strong against Dhelmise. Dhelmise gets the back-to-back Power Whips. This is a bad IV raid. Dhelmise, can it survive the Sucker Punch and get the back-to-back moves? No, I cannot. But I still should be in an okay position if I get the shield call right. I'm going to call the Ancient Power. They go for the Brave Bird, and that instantly ends the game. I tried to get a Thunderfang through. Unfortunately, it does not, and there's just no way to win. They had a ton of energy, so I felt like I had to make a call, and unfortunately, I made the wrong one. Dhelmise into Shadow Steelix. Shadow Steelix can have a variety of things in the back. Oftentimes, I do typically expect the Dragon Breath Tina plus Confusion Cresselia triple bulk line, so we'll have to see if it is going to be triple bulk after all. Psychic Fangs is going to land. They're going to send out Shadow Typhlosion, and oh my goodness, they are running ABA Weak to Gastrodon. I really need them to queue into the player that I played last match, as that player would absolutely destroy this team. My goodness. I'm going to throw 2 and the Aqua Tail, making sure that I'm throwing on good timing. And since I wasn't the fastest on the switch, but as long as you're not super slow, Drapion's 8 pacing is going to eventually allow you to catch back up. My opponent will have to try and go for a catch here if they want to save the Typhlosion. So I'm going to farm up. They wait, try for the catch onto Steelix. They try and go for a snipe, but I'm able to switch out and make a catch onto Dhelmise. Dhelmise, can I get the farm down here? It's going to be close. I cannot get the farm down, and that's going to force me to throw the Power Whip. I am going to zero bubble it here, hoping that it did not KO, but it does. And now my problem is when I don't make the Shadow Ball, Typhlosion has energy. They can just click Thunder Punch into the Drapion. So I'm going to go into the Steelix. They don't click the Thunder Punch. They overfarm, predicting a catch attempt of the Blast Burn. I don't go for it, and that allows me to snipe them down. In the back is Shadow Drifblim. Drifblim, The fact that their Shadow may actually give them an out in this game. If it was regular, I would be very okay, because Shadow Ball, not nearly going to be threatening. But this is the Shadow Drifblim, and that means they have some serious firepower on this Shadow Ball. It's going to be very close. Can Shadow Steelix hang on here? This does around 50%, and Shadow Steelix survives, and we clutch a very narrow win. We've got some spice from my opponent in the next match. Dhelmise into Runerigus. Runerigus throws on 5. This is just a Sand Tomb. I'm more than happy to let this go, but it's Brutal Swing. I completely forgot that this Pokemon got access to Brutal Swing some seasons back. They save switch into Licky Licky, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is some kind of double normal strat, or there's a Steelix as the third. Unfortunately, Licky Licky, it always feels like it has the move you don't want it to have. I was hoping it was going to have Shadow Ball, but no luck. It has Earthquake, and Earthquake is going to deal devastating damage. I decided to go for the Psychic Fangs bait here, but realistically, I should never be trying to bait a Licky Licky, and I can't even make the Earthquake. I farmed up a ton of energy on Dhelmise, but I was so far behind in this matchup that for me, I just have to let this go. I wasn't even able to make the Earthquake. Licky Licky could have won that cap tie. Now I send in the Shadow Drapion. They won't get the Earthquake. This is only a Body Slam. Body Slam, very, very okay. More than happy to tank that and get a farm down. Is it going to be double rollout? Of course, they're not going to be able to bring in the Runerigus, and there it is. There is Miltank hitting the field of play. Crunch is going to connect. Debuffs happen 30% of the time, but will not happen here. I massively overfarm with the Shadow Drapion. I do have close to 100 energy on the Dhelmise. Opponent undertaps, which is honestly a smart play, as I would have just gone for 1 and the move. So this way they're able to force my shield. I farm up. I'm well over 2 Aqua Tails. I'm expecting they're going to go for the same play again, so I undertap the Aqua Tail, and that's going to be a CMP tie. That is massive. And now I'm going to bring in the Dhelmise after I get KO'd, and I have to make the prediction. Do they stay or do they switch? I bring in the Dhelmise. There's the switch, and I fire off the Shadow Ball, but the Shadow Claw registered. Dhelmise very low. Will I get KO'd here by the rollout? No, I did not. Dhelmise hangs on. You can't even see the HP bar, and there is our redemption from the game where we lost to the 1 HP Venusaur, as 1 HP Dhelmise takes the win. Terrible lead in the next match, leading into Shadow Drapion. And now, with the Shadow Drapion being everywhere and the rollout users, these are a lot of the reasons why people do not run Trevenant. And unfortunately, those are a lot of the same reasons why the meta is very hostile to Dhelmise. I have a very strong meta core behind Dhelmise that is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, because there's some games where Dhelmise is able to pop off, but others where it just has absolutely no play. I'm going to send in Dhelmise. I can't get the farm down. I'm forced to throw energy here, so I will go for the Power Whip. That's going to pick up the knockout. In comes Drapion. I send in the Steelix. In the back is Virizion. And unfortunately, I just don't think there's a way for me to win this game. The alignment was just too negative, so I'm not going to waste anyone's time, and I resign the match. Hopping into the final match, leading Dhelmise into Shadow Zapdos. I'm going to save switch into Drapion. Opponent responds with Shadow Rhyperior, and this is a battle that I've played a couple days in a row as well. They have an incredibly cool team. They're going to shield up the Aqua Tail, fire off the Breaking Swipe. This will not knock out, but there's a 50-50 chance of an attack debuff, and if my attack does get lowered, as it does here, Aqua Tail suddenly becomes non-threatening to the Rhyperior. In comes Dhelmise. I would have got the farm down before they made the Rock Wrecker, so they're forced to settle for the Breaking Swipe. Breaking Swipe, give it, and it taketh. No debuff there for my opponent. Back in comes the Zapdos, but I'm up energy, and on top of that, I'm at a shield advantage, so I should be in a pretty okay position. The fact that they shielded tells me something in the back is going to be weak to Dhelmise, so I'm going to be staying in here, and I really do not want to give up alignment. Shadow Zapdos Drill Peck is going to be shielded. In the back is Virizion, and this is going to be a very interesting endgame. Dhelmise is strong into everything they have, but unfortunately my Steelix cannot do much against the Virizion. But Steelix is very bulky, so let's put that bulk to the test. I farm up as much as I can on Dhelmise, switch in the Steelix, and I'm just using Steelix as a meat shield. So I tank the back-to-back Sacred Swords. I am very low on HP, but I fire off the last-second Psychic Fangs to pick up the KO. The good news for me is that Shadow Zapdos, its fast moves are double resisted here, so I get to fire off the Psychic Fangs. Psychic Fangs lands. I stay in because they cannot Thundershock down, and that is a good game. All in all, Dhelmise, I had a surprising amount of fun with. I think the meta is extremely hostile to it right now. It's not a Pokemon that personally I would recommend running, but I think it's a Pokemon that is worth grabbing, which is not something that I expected. Looking at the Sims, this thing looked terrible, but it plays a lot like Trevenant does, understandably, as it has very similar typing, very similar stats, although slightly more attack weighted, and a very similar moveset, just with a bait move that's slightly more expensive, but a lot better damage per energy. So I think it's a great candidate in the future if it's able to get a cheaper bait move, and if the Ultra League meta becomes a little less hostile to it, like in the future, if we see stuff like Licky Licky and Drapion not as common, I think Dhelmise could have a place in the meta. So honestly, while this event is out, I would recommend doing a couple tier 3 raids. Not only do tier 3 raids give guaranteed charge TMs, and I know a lot of my viewers, myself included, are not sitting on a lot of charge TMs, but Dhelmise was actually pretty fun. Again, not a Pokemon that I would recommend building at the moment. I think the meta is very hostile to it, but it's definitely one to grab and stash, as I do surprisingly see a lot of potential in this Mon in future metas. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, consider leaving a like on the video and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.